Do you know the 5 biggest factors that determine if you have a large personal injury case worth lots of money? We're going to get into that today. I'm Bob Byrne. I'm an attorney who's been handling personal injury claims for a long time. I started handling small fender bender cases worth just a few $1,000s, and I'm now handling very large, complex tractor trailer cases that are worth millions and millions of dollars. So let's jump right into it and talk about the first factor that determines whether you have a large personal injury case. The first factor is that you suffer bad physical and emotional injuries as a result of a situation. So when we're talking about serious injuries, there's different types of injuries that can happen, say in a car crash or a truck crash. And primarily you're going to see orthopedic injuries, and there's a lot of neck and back injuries. So injuries to the spine, and those can come in various different ways. You could have kind of the soft tissue injuries of a disc injury. Maybe you have some of the actual bones that are fractured in the spine. Anytime you have a spine-related injury that's going to compress a nerve or endanger the spinal cord or anything like that, and surgery is required or at least suggested, that's going to be a significant injury. There are other types of orthopedic injuries, such as injuries to shoulders, injuries to knees, to hips, to wrists, to ankles. And those can have catastrophic consequences depending exactly on what happens with that injury. You also could have fractured bones, whether it's facial fractures, skull fractures, leg fractures, arm fractures. There could also be neurological injuries, like traumatic brain injuries, maybe complex regional pain syndrome. And oftentimes when you have these complex injuries, you're also going to have emotional consequences. People who are in bad tractor trailer crashes, for instance, oftentimes have PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, or they can have disabling anxiety disorders. And so those are the sorts of things that can kind of combine with those physical injuries to really create some debilitating injuries for someone to deal with. The second factor that can really lead to a large recovery is when those injuries that we just discussed are permanent in nature. So I have seen situations where people have had these orthopedic or neurological injuries, but they make a tremendous recovery. And ultimately, that would be your best case scenario. You want to be in a situation where you have your health, and that's far more important than having a great personal injury claim. But unfortunately, that's not always the reality, and sometimes it can be the case that these injuries can be permanent in nature. And when that happens, that means there's going to be a lifetime of pain and suffering, a lifetime perhaps of medical care, a lifetime of consequences. And that's the sort of thing that can magnify and enhance the value of a personal injury claim. So when you have those injuries and they are big and now they're going to be permanent, that can make a case very significant. A third factor that can make a personal injury claim a large one is the impact that those injuries have on your life. And so I want to think about this kind of impact analysis in two different ways. So on the one hand, there's kind of the economic impact. And the economic impact can be if you have a permanent injury that's going to require medical care for the rest of your life, then you're going to need medical attention that costs a lot of money forever. You could also have a situation where perhaps due to the nature of your injuries and the type of job that you have, you're going to you may miss the ability to work. You may miss a lot of work. You may miss out on your ability to have your dream job. And if you can show that that dream job that you'd make a whole lot more money for was within reach and you were working towards that, you might have what's called a loss of earning capacity claim, and you can actually seek the amount that you would have had if you had gotten that dream job. And so those are some of the economic consequences of both medical care into the future and the impact on your earnings into the future. But another big component is really not just the economics, it's the non-economics, the pain and suffering, the inconvenience, the mental anguish that the loss of these things has caused. And I think a really good way to understand how those injuries can impact your life is to understand how they impact the things that you're passionate about. And so maybe it's the case that you just adore your family and you're a mom and you've got these little kids and you love taking care of your little kids and helping them in every single way. But now as a result of this injury, you're not able to pick your children up, or you're not able to hold them. You're not able to do those things for them that you had always dreamed of doing, and you're never going to be able to do that for them. You're never going to be able to take care of your family in the way that you would have without this injury. Those are the sorts of things where your life is disrupted and the things that you're passionate about are disrupted, where there could be a significant impact that can impact the value of the case and make it significantly large. And so kind of the more meaningful those disruptions are, the better the claim can be. And so if you were to say, for instance, oh man, I used to love sitting out on my back porch and drinking beer every night until I passed out, and I can't do that anymore because these medications that I'm on, I'm not allowed to do that. Well, that's not something that really is going to drum up a lot of value, because people are going to look at that and say, you're probably better off without doing all that drinking. So that's not the type of passion we're talking about. It's got to be a passion that has real meaning and that brings value that people can see, they can understand, and it resonates with them. The fourth factor that can go into making a personal injury claim a large one is when the party that caused the injury, the defendant, was engaged in some type of bad conduct. And so in car and truck accident cases that we handle, an example of that would be where the defendant driver was drunk. He's under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and he's just out driving when he should never be behind the wheel, and he causes a crash due to his drunkenness, and he causes these horrific injuries that disrupt life, that are permanent in nature. That's the sort of thing that not only is it preventable, but it's just purely inexcusable. Like I was saying, I do a lot of trucking cases. So when you're talking about trucking cases, you could have bad conduct because instead of just someone out joyriding, you have a driver who's a professional driver who's driving for money. And so their employer might be pushing them to drive in bad weather, might be pushing them to drive when the driver is sick or not feeling well. The company may be pushing them to drive when the vehicle is not in good working order. And so all of these things where in a way that driver might be a victim of a greedy corporation that's really pushing them to do things that they're not comfortable doing. Those are the things that could potentially give rise to a claim for punitive damages, but it's the sort of thing that a jury could look at, be very, very upset about. And if a jury can be upset about it, then the insurance adjuster, through the negotiations process, is going to recognize that and recognize that this claim could have enhanced value. The fifth factor that I've found is in large personal injury cases is when my client, the injured party, is someone who has very credible evidence. And first and foremost, that begins with them. They are credible. They're a likable person. They're someone that you want to root for. They're someone that you look at and you say, you know what? This is a person who is minding their own business. They're working hard. They're making ends meet. They're responsible. They're taking care of themselves and their family. And then out of nowhere, this happened, and it's completely disrupted their life, and it's going to have ramifications for the rest of their life. When you have that, and you also have supportive family members, friends, but even more importantly, perhaps coworkers and even other acquaintances who have no proverbial dog in the fight and who will not benefit in any way from any type of a lawsuit or a claim. When you have strong evidence from those types of sources, then that's the sort of thing that, again, can increase the value of a claim when these other factors are present. Because oftentimes, Insurance adjusters and even juries are going to discount the evidence that comes directly from the injured party or even their family members, because they may say, well, the family members are going to benefit financially and the person who's injured is going to benefit financially. So it really is to their benefit to say these things. And juries can be distrustful of that. But when you have coworkers, when you have maybe people who don't have a personal relationship, but they've observed how this injury has impacted your life, those are the types of witnesses and the type of testimony and the type of evidence that can really drive the value of the case and make it significantly higher. So there you have it. The 5 factors that are the most important, but not the only, but the most important factors that determine whether your claim is a big one. And those are, you're going to have big injuries of a permanent nature that have a big impact on your life. You may have some bad conduct by the defendant, and you have a very credible claim. Now, you may have a big case where you don't have all 5 of those present. But generally speaking, I have found that those are the 5 factors that make a personal injury case worth a lot of money, relatively speaking. So I hope this is helpful. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Check out my other videos, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks.